This is a story about a story, which is unusual, I guess, because stories are usually about people or places, things or moments in time, but not this one. This is a story about a story. And not just any story, but the greatest story ever told. Just to be clear, this isn't the greatest story ever told. This is a tribute. Once upon a time, because if you can't start a story with once upon a time every now and again, then what's the point? Once upon a time, walking down a quiet country road, there was a person of meagre wealth, a person of nondescript looks, a seemingly average person in many respects, except for one. This person had the gift of storytelling. Their stories were wondrous and wild, spellbinding, beguiling and bewitching. They could tell such tales as would bring a tear to the eye, a smile to the mouth, and a laugh to the belly. Where most folk would trade in furs, food, or labour, the storyteller travelled from place to place, telling stories in return for food and shelter. And so it was that over time the storyteller met many people. And so it was that over time those people began to talk about this amazing storyteller. And so it was that over time word of these amazing stories reached as far as the devil. And so it was, whilst walking down a quiet country road, the devil appeared before the storyteller and demanded to hear the greatest story ever told, or the storyteller's soul will be taken back to hell. The storyteller took a moment, composed their thoughts, took a deep breath, and began a story. And what a story it was! Easily the best the storyteller had ever heard. Easily the best the storyteller had ever told. Easily the best anyone had ever told. And sure enough, it was bringing tears to the devil's eyes. It was bringing smiles to the devil's mouth. And it was bringing laughs to the devil's belly. And then, partway through, it stopped. And the storyteller sat down. The devil demanded the rest of the story. But the storyteller simply said this: the greatest story ever told would need a lifetime to craft, and I haven't yet had a full lifetime. So, you're going to have to come back later, and I'll finish then. The devil growled, grumbled, and glowered, and then disappeared. The storyteller stood up, brushed themselves off, and continued their journey. The devil kept an eye on the storyteller, making sure they didn't come to harm, but eventually the curiosity became too much. And so it was that one day, whilst walking down a quiet country road, the devil appeared before the now older storyteller and demanded the greatest story ever told, or the storyteller's soul would be taken back to hell. The storyteller took a moment, composed their thoughts, took a deep breath, and continued the story. And what a story it was! Easily the best the storyteller had ever heard. Easily the best the storyteller had ever told. Easily the best anyone had ever told. And again it was bringing tears to the devil's eyes. And again it was bringing smiles to the devil's mouth. And again it was bringing laughs to the devil's belly. And again, partway through, it stopped, and the storyteller sat down. The devil demanded the rest of the story, but the storyteller simply said this: the greatest story ever told would need a lifetime to craft, and I haven't yet had a full lifetime, so gonna have to come back later, and I'll finish it then. The devil growled, grumbled, and glowered, and then disappeared. The storyteller stood up, brushed themselves off, and continued their journey. The devil kept an eye on the storyteller, making sure they didn't come to harm, and as the storyteller was coming to the end of their life, the curiosity once again became too much. And so it was One day, whilst walking down a quiet country road, the devil appeared before the now hunched, grey-haired old storyteller, and demanded the greatest story ever told, or the storyteller's soul would be taken back to hell. The storyteller took a moment, composed their thoughts, stretched their poor tired old bones, took a deep breath, and finished the story. And what a story it was! Easily the best the storyteller had ever heard, easily the best the storyteller had ever told, easily the best anyone had ever told. And it was bringing the biggest tears to the devil's eyes, and it was bringing the biggest smiles to the devil's mouth, and it was bringing the biggest laughs to the devil's belly. And then, finally, it was over, leaving only the greatest cliffhanger a story had ever had. And the storyteller sat down. The devil demanded to know what happened after the story, but the storyteller simply said this: the sequel to the greatest story ever told would need a lifetime to craft, and I no longer have a lifetime left to craft it. So, if you want to know what happens next, gonna have to grant me another life, and I'll continue then. The devil growled, grumbled, and glowered, and then disappeared. The storyteller stood up, young, energetic, full of life. They brushed themselves off and continued their journey. One last thing. If you ever come across someone of meagre wealth, someone of nondescript looks who somehow seems old beyond their years, travelling from place to place, telling stories in return for food and shelter, don't ask to hear the greatest story ever told, because by now, the greatest story ever told would need a lifetime just to listen to it.